Rage is one of those games that perfectly represents a very specific era in gaming, not because it was revolutionary or because it defined a genre, but because it sits right in the middle of so many industry trends that were happening at the time. Open worlds were becoming mandatory, shooters were still king, RPG elements were being added to everything, and post-apocalyptic settings were absolutely everywhere. And Rage tried to do all that at once. Developed by ID Software, literal pioneers of the FPS genre, and published by Bethesda, expectations were naturally high. This was ID stepping away from pure linear shooters like Doom and Quake, and trying something more modern and ambitious. On paper, Rage sounded like it could be huge. An open wasteland, RPG mechanics, vehicles, story-driven missions, and that classic ID gunplay tying it all together. But what we got was something much more conflicted. To really understand Rage, you have to remember what gaming looked like in 2011. Call of Duty was dominating multiplayer shooters, Battlefield was going bigger and louder, Fallout New Vegas had just shown how strong a post-apocalyptic RPG could be, Borderlands was mixing shooters with loot systems, everyone was blending genres. ID Software, meanwhile, was known for doing one thing extremely well: fast, tight, mechanically perfect shooters. Rage was them trying to evolve with the industry rather than stay in their lane, and while that ambition is admirable, it also explains a lot of the game's issues. Rage feels like a studio experimenting in real time, testing ideals that they weren't fully comfortable committing to yet. The story of Rage is technically there. An asteroid threatens Earth, humanity builds arcs, you wake up years later, and the world has gone to hell. That's the setup. And honestly, that's about as much thought as the game seems to give it. The narrative isn't bad, but it's incredibly thin. It doesn't evolve much, it doesn't challenge the player, and it doesn't really justify the journey. Most of the story exists through mission briefings and short conversations that boil down to, go here and kill these guys. What makes it worse is that the game clearly wants to be story-driven. Characters talk a lot, towns are populated, there's lore everywhere, but none of it comes together into something memorable. Rage has a lot of characters, but almost none of them stick with you. They're not offensively bad, they're just flat. They exist to give you missions and provide world flavor. NPCs in Wellspring and Subway Town have unique designs and voices, but very little development. This wouldn't be such a problem if the game didn't push them so hard. Rage wants you to care about these people, but it never gives you a reason to. One thing Rage absolutely deserves credit for is its world design. The wasteland isn't massive, but it's detailed. Everything feels intentionally placed. There's a sense of geography and structure that many larger open world games lack. The roads wind naturally, settlements feel logical. Enemy hideouts look like places people would actually occupy. It feels like a real space, not just a playground. But despite all that effort, the world feels oddly hollow. There's not much to discover outside of main and side missions. Exploration rarely leads to meaningful rewards. You're encouraged to move forward, not to linger. Rage doesn't trust the player to get lost in his world, and that makes the wasteland feel more like a set of hallways than a place. The gunplay is pretty fun. Every weapon feels powerful and distinct. Shooting enemies feels satisfying in a way that few shooters from that era managed. Enemy reactions are key here. Bandits flinch, stagger, and react dynamically to being shot. This alone makes combat feel more grounded and intense. Weapons like the shotgun, assault rifle, and sniper all have clear roles, while gadgets like turrets and wing sticks add creativity. The game encourages smart positioning and tactical thinking, even if it rarely demands it. The tragedy is that the combat never fully escalates. The game doesn't throw enough enemies at you. It doesn't create sustained pressure. Encounters are often over too quickly. It's like Rage is afraid of overwhelming the player, and in doing so, it never reaches its full potential. Rage is oddly conservative in its design. It wants to be accessible. It rarely punishes mistakes harshly. Resources are plentiful enough that survival never feels desperate. This clashes with the post-apocalyptic tone. The world looks brutal, but the gameplay rarely feels that way. A higher difficulty helps a bit, but even then the game never fully commits to tension. It's polished, but safe. Rage includes light RPG mechanics, crafting, ammo types, upgrades, vendors. On paper this adds depth. In reality, most of it feels optional. You can ignore crafting and still succeed. Special ammo is rarely necessary. Upgrades improve quality of life more than strategy. This makes the systems feel like leftovers from a bigger ideal that was scaled back. The driving mechanics in Rage are solid, vehicle combat is fun, racing events are genuinely enjoyable, but once again, there's not enough of it. You upgrade your car, learn its systems, and then the game is basically over. Vehicle combat feels like the foundation for an entirely separate game that never happened. At launch, Rage was ambitious. The texture streaming technology allowed for massive detail, but also caused infamous texture popped-in issues. These problems hurt immersion and damaged the game's reputation early on. Even after patches, the damage was done. Artistically, though, the game holds up. The visual style is consistent, gritty, and well realized. Rage didn't fail because it was bad. It failed because it was indecisive. It tried to be a story-driven shooter, an open-world exploration game, a vehicle combat game, an RPG, and it never fully committed to any of them. In a competitive market, that meant being overshadowed by games that went all in on their strengths. Looking back, Rage feels like a stepping stone. You can see ideals here that would later be refined, abandoned, or expanded in future games. It's a game by a legendary studio trying to figure out how to adapt to a changing industry. Rage is frustrating because it's competent in almost every area, but amazing in only one: gunplay. Everything else feels like it stopped just short of greatness. It's not a game people remember fondly. It's one people revisit with curiosity. Rage isn't a masterpiece. It isn't a disaster. It's a reminder that ambition alone isn't enough. You also need conviction. And in the end, Rage feels less like a finished vision and more like a question IDE Software was asking itself. What do we want to be next?